Welcome to the Music Prophet. We're here live with Joey Karma.
Yo. How's it going? Everybody?
Thanks for coming on the Music Prophet. I think it's going to be fun to just kind of like jump into the music process itself.
Yep.
And kind of just, like dive into like the writing, production, and...
Yeah, man. I love talking about the craft behind the music and building up to a song or where the idea comes from. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, man.
It's an honor.
So for anyone listening that isn't familiar with you, let's kind of give them a breakdown of your sound and like how long you've been doing it. That just the general,
So I was born in Sudbury. I grew up in the valley, playing hockey, getting into fights, getting into trouble. I started making music at like 9, 10, recording it by 12. I had a friend, he's a little bit older than me back then. Well, he's a couple years older than me, His stepfather had a bunch of MCTV equipment. So we'd put that all together and whip up some recordings, live scratching, live performance. We practiced a bit of everything back then. So I think performing the music and kind of showcasing my skills to people, even in like little circles at school and smoking section, you freestyle to the smoking section, that became my like path into writing music. And I didn't really get serious about songwriting until 17, 18, like serious about what I was writing. Prior to, it's just like that practice, that stage where you're getting your emotions out, but you might not be clearly relating with people, Otherwise, my music, my roots in music come from listening to a bit of everything. So my parents raised me on like a little bit of Jan Arden, a little bit of Bob Marley, a little bit of UB40, Elton John, a little bit of everything. So I really like to showcase that when I'm making music. I don't like to just be hip hop. I like to mix in other genres,
When it comes to mixing genres, are there certain ones you draw from the most? Are there piano chords that you heard in Jan Arden that you're like, this needs to be in every track?
I feel like it lately over the last 4 or 5 years. I think I'm secretly a fan of like old Gaelic folklore music. So a lot of dark indie music and indie songs, bands like Seafret, they really push me to like explore where I can go with a song. I listen to a lot of different music to motivate me. I don't really listen to a lot of rap and hip hop lately. When I do, it's like when I'm with friends or in a crowd or at the bar. But I listen to a lot of independent music, a lot of indie artists, and I'm a fan of guitar. I feel like I've always been in love with guitar. Anything in the minor key, like I'm just in love with it. It just tends to fit where I want to go with my voice.
So are you an acoustic or electric kind of dude?
Acoustic, I believe. I've done a couple beats lately that I purchased from this producer in the States, in Michigan, actually. Shout out to him. And they're acoustic. They're purely acoustic. There's no drum pattern. My voice becomes a drum. There's no hi-hats. There's no nothing going on but acoustic. And I'm going to put out a little 3-track sample, more like a demo of me on acoustic beats. So
it is interesting because that's kind of where spoken word,
where
it almost comes at, and then
100%. And like when I'm building it, it's like layers. Like my first vocal is like a little bit of that drum pattern, and then if I add a little bit of an underlay to that vocal, then all of a sudden you hear percussion within the beat. So it becomes less of an acoustic when you're doing something like hip hop. I feel like on acoustic, all of a sudden you hear a whole instrumental from your voice. It's pretty crazy.
When it comes to songwriting for that, do you change up? Like, are you more conscious about word placement as much as you would normally be, or are you thinking more like what are you thinking about, and what elements are you trying to actually focus on when you're writing for acoustic more than a beat that's already built? With 808s and the synth? And
I feel like the focus was more and is more for me the vibe. Like if I can time in my emotions the right way, it all falls into place, I feel like. So while I'm creating my music on acoustic beats lately, I'll literally just let the beat play for an hour before I even think about what I'm writing. I'll just let it fall into me. And then once the beat's really into me, I can walk around the house, come up with what I'm gonna do. Then I'll just go to the mic, record a chorus or a hook freestyle, and then go back under that with some written lyrics. And it's a layering process. Like I said, it's like I'm looking for the vibe, I think. I think that's my key goal is to like make the vibe right, you know? Get my message out, yeah. Relate to people, of course, but if the vibe falls in place, then everything else will come together.
What sort of, like, can you kind of expand on vibe?
Yeah.
Even?
So, I mean, like, your emotional status in the moment, and then the emotional status that you might want to output in the song might be different. So to match them up and make sure that you're in key with what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and be able to actually put that out instead of kind of maybe beat around the bush by metaphorically talking about it. You know what I mean? Getting directly to the point first, being vulnerable, and then confiding in yourself to find the rest of the answers within the song. You know what I mean? More like a poem. So when I say a vibe, it's like the emotion has to be there, and the emotion is going to lead you into what you want to say initially, like your main message for that day or that moment, and then you go from there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So your vibe today might be, oh, I've been waking up late, you know, I've been having slow days, this and this. The vibe next day might be like, or next week might be, oh, I'm in a great mood, everything's been going good, people have been hitting me up, business is great. The week after, oh, I just lost a friend, this and that. So wherever the vibe is, bringing that initially into play right away instead of looking for something to do on the song. Yeah, you know what? I'm a big fan of like we were talking about, like acoustic. So I really felt like I went on the melody. I like invisibly disappeared the drums in my mind. Like I'm not looking at the drums. I was looking at that, messing with that time, and so I could slide in between where I felt like was right. And the bass just kicks it harder with that 808 kind of delay, pulled back delay, you know? Mm-hmm. Gives it sense, that guitar, that kind of, it's got an acoustic appeal, but then you got the drums and everything there with it, right? So it starts off, that's where I'm like, that's what leads me into these beats, I feel like, sometimes, is those 808s that extend, but I like working with the acoustic, right? So.
Where do you see everything going? Like, since you're going more acoustic,
yeah,
that's
so
kind of, that was a trend.
Yeah, so just the guitar, the 3-track acoustic project I'm working with, beautiful, right? It's just guitar. It's just like, to be able to accent any different type of melody and to create something else from it, mm-hmm. and make a different melody, that's really exciting to me. And I never really got into that when I was in college working on music with people who were playing guitar around me. We'd work on music together, but we never just worked on acoustic work.
Yeah,
there would be some drums or something else involved. So,
but is that sort of your prediction on where things are headed in the rap game?
No,
towards
I feel
more
like,
acoustic, lyrical type.
I feel like they're like side projects. Like it's like a special type of album. Like you could do albums, you could do EPs, but to do a acoustic album or an acoustic demo or EP, it's just like, it's showcasing that you're really more of an artist than you are a performer, you know? It's just, or you're more of a performer than you are an artist. You just, whatever someone wants to take from that. I believe it just shows the creative side of any artist, you know? Especially when people like, you got Chris Brown who did it, Justin Bieber, 50 Cent even did it. And then now it's like a trend in the new upcoming hip hop game with like Polo G, No Cap. They're all singing or rapping over someone with a banjo. And it's super cool. I believe that might have motivated me too. I was already doing it as that was happening, but I did it a couple years ago as well. Like I say 3, 4, 5 years ago, I worked on 3, 4, 5 projects with a couple different people. My buddy Crip, my buddy Mike Major. And I never released them because I'm really self-conscious sometimes about where I'm going when I'm in a new direction. But the new ones I'm working on, I'm definitely going to have released. And I think they led me to make songs like Die Off, which are full instrumental. You know, the whole production's there. But I'd show the producer a couple acoustic tracks, And he'd be like, oh, cool, I think you might like this beat. I've been working on it. I'm like, cool, yeah, just add some drums and I'll mess with that. Boom. So
When you say that you are self-conscious, is it because you're thinking, is it because you think that the fans won't like it, or is it because it's not up to your musical level?
I believe it's like, you have a voice in your mind when you're working on a song. You have a projection in your mind of what you want from the song, a premeditated idea. And if you don't get it immediately and you have to work at it again, people might like it already while you're showing them, but you know that you can make it so much better. So it's like a perfectionist thing. It's like it's just like a little bit of a producer anxiety, because I produce and mix and master my own music. So it's not just stepping in the booth, recording, walking away, writing the next song. It's sitting there making sure it's perfect, mixing it down, going back a week later, mastering it for a day, So it's more of a process, and I'm a bit more of a perfectionist because of it.
Do you feel that hurts you in the long run?
Oh, it definitely could, yeah. It definitely has at times in periods of my life. And yeah, it definitely can. Because I could have got hundreds of songs out by now, maybe 4 or 5 albums. I've only dropped like 11, 12 mixtapes that were serious, 1 EP. Never dropped an album yet. I've been working on singles that people believe they're like, oh, this could be an album single. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to work on an album. These are just premeditated singles that show you what I can do with an album. But it's definitely hurt me a couple times in my life where I could have released a lot of music and maybe got ahead of a lot of people. I'm just not so competitive, and I don't envy people. So because of that, it doesn't bother me to hold back a little bit and then let go when I feel like I really need to,
Yeah, because the rap game, it's not a race.
Exactly. And I don't feel like I need to compete with people. It's more like I'm competing with myself to make better music.
Yeah, it's always... Because I feel like that's a better way to do it than some rappers who release something every 3 months.
Yeah, and I've been that guy in the past. Well, I had to sit back and stop for years and realize that I didn't need to.
Yeah. It's always interesting, because then it's, even from like a radio host media point of view, it's tough to promote those. Like every time there's new stuff coming out, like you can't. Yeah. It's not that special anymore.
Yeah. How do you stay on the ball, right? It's like, someone's dropping an album or a video 5, 6 times a year, 7 times a year, you end up only liking 1 or 2. But if they're just dropping songs or the odd songs and they're not putting them all in your face, they're not making them all seem to be the most important thing, you might not get flooded and annoyed by them. So it definitely is a process for artists these days, because there is a lot of competition, I find, within the industry. So the artists who are outside the industry, like me, who are still kind of underground mainstream, need to develop sort of that competitive level sometimes, right? It's not always easy for Canadian artists as well to stand up and want to compete with the American industry, but I believe it should happen more often.
And especially with mainstream rap.
Without like really being competitive in a way where it's like, we know what we're doing,
Yeah, it's like it's competitive in a non-athletic sense of the word. Yeah.
Exactly.
But you're right, man. When you look at the mainstream rap industry itself and how much demand there is for people to release projects, and it's wild how much you're expected to put out.
Yeah, and the moment you start creating that expectation, then you're kind of stuck. So the moment you stop feeding them what they want, because they expect you to drop something every 2 months or every 3 months, and the moment you stop, it's like, whoa. I used to drop something like every week. So that was a lot to me. Dropping something every month or so, that's not really a problem. I can do that. I'm already ahead of myself. Like, I have 24 songs finished and like 7 other songs I'm working on, then a little EP over here, then features over here, then a single with Flavor Records out of Thunder Bay that I'm working on, and that actually have a feature with Crooked Eye from Slaughterhouse that I'm working on as well. For the Gods vs. Titans EP2 from Flavor Records. So like these little projects, to have a lot of projects ahead of yourself, then you can keep up with certain people. But going in it without having that kind of like, going into your first initial couple releases and not having a bunch of extra projects, I think that's what makes it competitive for a lot of these artists. They get full of themselves. I see a lot of big artists get full of themselves, do great. And I'm like, I applaud them. I'm like, awesome. I love this one song. Blah blah blah. A year later, they're gone because they couldn't keep up with an artist who was on their same record label. You know what I mean? So I think you really have to like kind of be ahead of yourself when you start releasing and being serious about your releases.
And I feel like there's a layer too of, because you said earlier, you mentioned it too, which I found really kind of dope. You brought up was artist versus performer, because you can notice that too when you look at some people like Jid, versus someone like Lil Yachty, where you can tell it's one person who writes everything from scratch versus the other who probably has
freestyles and 5 writers.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like it's definitely there's a layer that the true artists are able to maintain it, but they have to be spending the whole time working on the craft. Yeah,
and it might be harder for the artist versus the performer, but the performer is like seeking like glamour and glitz, you know? The artist is seeking silver linings. Like it's like that little difference is like what it's worth. So I feel like it's the same with athletes, with painters, with cooks, chefs, you know, hairstylists, people who do a certain craft. They either want to be a perfectionist at it or they just want to look really good doing it. So some people find a way to mediate between the two. But yeah, that's why I believe the artist versus performer thing is a whole thing of the new day and age. Like it's the important thing. It's an important stage of music because there's a lot of artists that are great performers. But you know there's 100 other artists that are more lyrical on the back end that aren't getting heard, that have a story that might be a better performer in the long run if they had the work or the time put in. I see it every day. There's artists. I see great artists all the time, but not everybody looks to them to be great. You know?
Yeah, there's that certain status, right? When you make beats, are you building up?
Just like you said, I'm literally like looking for the hook sound first. So when I'm making the beat, whether it's I'm using a sample or you're making from scratch, you're just looking for that hook sound. You know what I mean? Or the lead up to the hook. What's going to lead you into your change up in the song. So what's going to go from verse to hook? What's going to go from verse to hook? Then let the rest build off that.
It's verse or the hook?
Listening experience, verse or the hook. I feel like the hook is what can catch you in, get you addicted to the song, but the verse is what's gonna be like the message. Like it's like when you say a speech, right? You have your salutations, you have your end of your speech, but the middle part is what captivates people. So I feel like that's what a song is supposed to be. It's not the case though. Sometimes you start a song with the hook and then the verse comes in and that verse is more effective. The hook's more effective. Sometimes you start a song with the verse and then the hook drops in, and because of that, the verse was more effective. It can change and differ. And I don't like to only cut my songs into verses and hooks. I like to write it as if there's bridges and ballads and you know what I mean? I don't like to kind of follow format. I like to jump off format sometimes with the beat. So it always depends. I think it differs.
Yeah, I noticed that with Jupiter.
Yeah.
It's very much like that. You hit that 3-minute mark, it starts to fade out, but it's only just like a instrumental bridge. And then the beat switches again for the actual outro.
Yeah. So I love change ups in instrumentation. It changes your emotions because you're listening to it, you're feeling one thing, then all of a sudden that change up, boom, makes you feel a whole different thing, whether it brings you up or down. I love that in music. I love when a beat's vulnerable because then it helps you expose certain things you want to write about and think about, whatever the case is. And I find vulnerability is what helps people relate the most, being honest. So.
And is that just because you listen to a lot of classic 80s, 90s songwriters?
I think so, man. It's even artists like Tom Petty, John Lennon, I have an ear for a certain type of message and a certain type of emotion with that message. So, and some rap songs will captivate that for me. Some rock and roll songs, some blues songs, some country. I know a lot of people always say they don't like country, but I think secretly everybody loves country because it's where everything comes from.
You just have to find your sound.
You know what I mean? So I love every genre, and I feel like I love every genre more than I love rap. So I definitely take my like influence from old '80s, '90s, the best of those artists. You know.
It's interesting you say that because I feel like if anyone else heard that, that's not a musician or artist, they'd be like, well, why don't you make other music?
I do. I'll make songs that are different genres. I just don't like to always, like I said, I do have anxiety, and I procrastinate on getting things out that people might love, but I don't know. You know what I mean? And I feel like I could perfect it more, or whatever the case is. I doubt myself sometimes, and I could put a lot more work out. I know I have more songs than a lot of people that I know and have worked around. I always make music, so I'm always writing or rehearsing something or putting something down.
Well, the hard part too, when you start jumping in other genres, is that you have to have that ability to sing or play acoustic.
Yeah, like
or...
full out sing. Like I can melodize and like vocalize and falsetto and stuff, but like all out sing, like lead vocalist, nah. You know what I mean? That's a different level of singing. And there are people who come up to me like, "Oh, I love that song. You sing this and this." I'm like, I'm not really singing. Like I'm like melodizing. You know what I mean?
I sang a note. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I hit a couple notes, but yeah. Like I sang in I was actually in a choir before and things like that. I had to do vocal theory. I had a vocal teacher, two different vocal teachers, a pianist and accompanist, and I had to do singing. I sang in Russian. I sang in German. I had to do sea shanties and whatnot. But even then, as much as I passed and did good on those, I'm not a singer. You know what I mean? I'm a vocalist. I'm an artist. The voice, your voice is like a instrument itself. So when you can use it in different ways, like I'm versatile to an extent where I can sing high or sing low or sing mid, but without over singing, right? I applaud anybody who can really like carry those vocals and those notes back and forth like crazy, you know?
Yeah, like, because especially when it comes to like holding tone, that's a challenge that unless you're classically trained, you're not going to have any luck doing it, I feel like.
And I only have a year of classical training, so it does it to me like I'm not classically trained.
Of course, yeah.
I couldn't imagine being like, 8 years classically trained with an accompanist, 10 different pianists. Oh my God.
Is that where, but do you see yourself jumping into that? Like long term?
I see myself helping other artists and going into teaching long term. I'm thinking of working with artists in the future. I've done it in the past, and I've always had a great joy with watching others kind of transpire into what they want to become or what they want to bring out of their music and bringing it to life, helping them bring it to life. So I see myself helping artists in the future, maybe going into teaching. I have a couple more years in me of dropping some albums, and I have some hot videos that I'm actually dropping at the top of 220. I've just been holding them back, and I have a lot to do next year musically, and to get myself on tour. I dodged a tour this year, so I'm going to be actually setting up a tour next year, and mid next year, hopefully going on tour. After that, I want to get into teaching and helping some artists,
Yeah, I mean, even more so than you do now, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like the amount of artists that you've either produced or recorded for or helped them build an album I think it's a longer list than most people think.
Actually, like I made a list, and then it was like 86 or 88 people just locally, and then I kept adding and revising, and I realized I was over 206 once I got to like talking about some artists from Montreal, a couple artists from Timmins, a couple artists from the Sioux, the Island.
Which isn't two artists that you've worked
Since
with
13,
ridiculous.
Yeah. Either collabed with, worked with, or recorded, or actually like helped them develop, whatever the case. Put them on stage, shot their video, invested some money, built their logos, paid for their logo design, whatever the case. I just help artists get their stuff together so that they see what I see in them, right? And they can be a little bit more confident about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, as kind of like the final topic before we go out,
Yep.
Like, when you see an artist, do you have some sort of like guidelines that you hear their track and you're thinking, cool, this box is checked off, this one is checked off, this one isn't, but it could be?
Yeah, I guess I don't. It's not really guidelines. I'd say it's like everybody's different. So some artists they might have the delivery down packed, and I could see the passion in the way they deliver, and I could see how much they want to excel at that. And maybe they're just missing a little bit of lyrical ability, or they're too lyrical and they need to dumb it down a bit so that people can relate. Or they're just missing being comfortable with themselves and having a bit of self-esteem. I think it's different in every artist, but I always see something that stands out. Like, it could be their voice, it could be something they said that is just like, oh wow, that's an old soul. You know what I mean? He's 16 years old or he's 21 years old and he's thinking like he's an old man, like, he's wise. It's just something different. Everybody has something different that I like, I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting because I find that with entrepreneurship, like it's not really guidelines, but there are like certain standards that, like when someone's asking for help or mentorship, you kind of like, you look at them.
Exactly.
And you see, are these three things, like, are there certain things here that I can actually build on,
Exactly. It's like they either have natural ability to do one of the 5 major skills involved in hip hop, or they know them all and they just need to work at them all. Either or. I always just see what it is that they do well and they can do better. And I just let them know that they're amazing at that already. Instead of like undermining it, I push it and motivate it to a point where they believe in themselves fully because they weren't questioned about that one thing they're really good at,
Mm-hmm.
So,
on that note, I think that's going to wrap it up.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that was dope. It was a solid episode, and I like that you can have rap artists come on here and actually just be equivalent to, it's one of those things that it comes with the genre, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's that perception.
They don't think we're human.
Right? So it's sweet that you're able to come on here and especially just kind of share the bit of the wisdom.
Look out for new Joey Karma songs on Google. Just type in Joey Karma on Google. I'm on every streaming platform, and you can also find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook.
And then that will finish the music proffer for this week. So thanks for listening. Take care.